we are live. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for jumping in today. And I'll share my screen so you guys can see as well. Perfect. I think that should come through now. Someone tell me you can see my screen.
We can.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. I'll go ahead and put this in a slideshow just for visibility. Once again, I officially welcome you all to NerdKnight episode 10. We've actually got into the no, double digits, which means from here it's 150 and beyond, right? To the moon and beyond. So quite excited to be here. I'm looking forward to obviously continuing to grow and to expand our reach and the capability that we have within CyberLynk. So I want to thank each and every one of you that are on the call for your time and for your persistence, really, for those who have actually continued to learn. Hopefully everyone has been. So it's a thing of joy to me. I was having a chat with someone recently saying I was telling them that for me the singular thing of joy to me is seeing people who have received this help get that first job in cybersecurity and ultimately begin to do great things, not just get a job but actually thrive in the job. Because as Nathan would tell you, getting that job is half the battle. You actually need to pass your probation. You actually need to deliver value there. So I'm excited to sort of help everyone, get through this next chapter and also bring in the right people, the right content, the best of the best content. It might not be as pretty or as clicky or like the rest, but we make sure that you get the most value out of the content that we have on Academy. So without any further ado, I'm your host, Sammy Chucks, the founder and CEO of CyberLynk. Kind of started calling myself Cyber Yoda because I'm old and wise. Did anyone get that joke?
You're old and wise, but you
W-
don't
Yeah.
have a beard, so how does that work?
Well, Yoda doesn't have a beard. It's a tiny thing.
Oh, I see. I see.
Well, the joke
I don't
is
know how it
a wise
works.
person never say they're wise. So if you say you're
Oh,
wise, then that
okay.
automatically means you're not wise. But yeah. Look, quite excited for us to have a bit of fun today. We've got Paul jumping in. I think someone has let him in.
Yep.
We've got a special guest in our midst today, so very renowned mentor. I did not change one thing in there. I do apologize. Karthik Murali. Everyone give it up for Karthik. And I'll read a quick blog just to quickly introduce. I don't know if you guys could see me clapping, but I'll read it out here in Karthik's own words. Right, Karthik is an experienced cybersecurity professional in the industry. He's currently a cloud security specialist at AIG, and just prior to this role, he was an information security lead at Novati. So he's he's a master. Like, can everyone do the master emoji? Do we have the ability to do that here? Probably not. Novati was a fintech company. It has always had a passion for technology. Well, this is Karthik here, not Novati. Karthik has always had a passion for cybersecurity, for technology as a whole since he was a young lad, and accidentally found cybersecurity right after high school. Jeez, what a perfect timing, mate. This led him to ditch the traditional route of university and instead taught himself throughout his whole career. So, guys, like I told you guys, we've got an absolute self-made master in the room. He's a Shifo. He's keen in helping others ignite the passion for technology, especially cybersecurity, and helping them get into a job they love, which is cybersecurity. You can often find him at local conferences, events, meetups, and so on and so forth. Um, Quite often, when you see me, Karthik is probably there as well. So, everyone, I would like you to welcome our new mentor, Karthik, to the session. So, Karthik, thank you so much for jumping on board. Do you have something to say for yourself?
Yeah, no, thanks, Sammy. Thank you for the introduction and thanks for having me on. Yeah, really keen to get into tonight's topic of cloud security. Hopefully you guys, everyone here can take away something. Even Sammy and Nathan and
Oh yeah, I
all the
will take
experts as
away
well.
something.
Hopefully,
Oh,
get some tidbits.
Oh,
But yeah, really keen and yeah, thank you for
you
having
are the
me.
master, so there's definitely something I'm going to take away from this.
Yeah,
mate, all of us are masters in our own little way.
yeah,
I mean, Sammy sees me as a master of Python. I don't really see myself as a master, but anyway, he'll be learning something from me on that. I'll be learning something from him on in terms of putting together Splunk and detection engineering and that sort of stuff. And then of
yeah.
course your cloud security stuff. I don't know anything about cloud security, so
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, you're right. Sammy's definitely with detection engineering. I still remember, I think it was last year, one of the blue team meetups. What's it called? Sammy did a talk. I think that's where I first met Sammy. Probably that or like just before that. He did a talk on detection engineering and picking up. I think what was it? It was registry changes, how to pick up registry changes and like detection engineer for that and looking out for that stuff. I still remember that talk. So.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, it was
I
a good
remember
talk.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's good. It's awesome. I'm sure everyone here has a thing or two that we can all learn from each other. But I think the point that we're trying to make, and just without having to waste any time, whoever was the last person that jumped on, welcome on board as well. I'm not sure. I cannot see the screen. Um, and I'm trying to make sure that everyone really remembers this. At CyberLynk, our singular goal is to help everyone gain an edge, to give you an edge. I don't know if you guys have seen the whole news about how, there's a job, shrinkage in cybersecurity. Well, I refuse to believe that because there are still jobs that are hiring. The difference is, there are now more people wanting to get a job in cybersecurity than there are before. So, which means there's the supply has outpaced demand in the basic economics, right? But the reality is this: that supply always tilts in the favor of people who have the right skill. And that's what we're doing here. That's why Karthik is here. That's why Nathan is here. That's why I'm here. I could have done what my competitors and everyone else do, which is one man, one person just doing it all, just sitting down. It's like, yeah, I know everything about cybersecurity. I'm going to show you because I'm the master of it all. But I want to make sure that everyone who is part of this program, who's part of what we're doing, and who's part of CyberLink gains an advantage that no one else out there is able to do. And that's why we've quite intentionally picked some of the content, some of the topics, some of the curriculum that you guys are going through on the academy platform. And also, this is why we have Nerd Night. Yeah, almighty Nerd Night. I love Nerd Night. And I think there's still a debate on the name Nerd Night, but I think it's sold. It's pretty cool. Anyways, aside from that, we also have the in-person events that happen in Melbourne, which starting from next month, for those who are not in Australia, that would actually be broadcasted in overseas as well, so you can be part of that. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here for everyone to be part of this, and ultimately, there is something that's going to make you stand out at the end of this program. You're going to learn the kind of skill that employers are ultimately looking for, and they're happy to pay top dollar for. So hopefully, everyone is excited as I am on this journey. And yeah, we'll see how we go. All right, it's that favorite time of the evening for me. It's threat landscape time. All right, I'm
oh
gonna.
boy.
Who said, "Oh boy"?
It's your one and only.
Okay, fair enough. Are you saying that my threat landscape is boring or what, mate?
No, no, of course not. I would never say that.
All right, now, Alex, I know you're from a certain part of the world. This has nothing to do with that. I don't actually. Anyways, I'll start. I'll apologize later if I say something that's offensive. But this is on Rhythm Unplugged. We are all gonna have fun here. So the first topic of the day, and by the way, this is usually why I invite everyone to partake and to be part of this. This is an interactive session, so this is not just one person speaking at the crowd. So if there's anything, if anyone has read this news or anyone has anything to add, please feel free to do so. But we'll pick our first one of the day, and that's the one about Kaspersky installing Ultra AV antivirus without warning.
Yeah, this article was. I don't know if I read this article exactly. I read another one on a similar thing, but this particular topic was pretty interesting, pretty funny, and just all round crazy.
Yeah. All right. Let's dig into it. So this is by Sergio Gatlan, and this is from Blipping Computer. So starting Thursday, Russian cybersecurity company. So Alex, this is why I was saying. Hopefully, I don't say anything that's annoying. Kaspersky deleted its anti-malware software from customers' computers across the United States and automatically replaced it with Ultra AV antivirus solution. Yay! Garbage in, garbage out. This comes after Kaspersky decided to shut down its U.S. operation and lay off U.S.-based employees in response to the U.S. government adding Kaspersky to the enlisted entity list, a catalog of foreign individuals, companies, and organizations deemed a national security concern in June this year. So just to really spend some time on this. So we're going to come back. I'm sure people have opinions on why the US did this or if it's the right thing or not. But let's continue on really quickly. On June the 20th, the Biden administration also announced a ban on sale and software update for Kaspersky antivirus software in the United States starting September 29th, 2024. Again, this is another bold move. I wonder why, right? Because I have my opinions. I'll hold it off for now until we come back. Um,
It's a politics, man.
Sorry?
It's a politics.
It's politics. All right. Hang on, everyone. Can you put your thin foil hat on? It's time for conspiracy theory. We're gonna have a board tonight. It's gonna be awesome. Over potential national security risk. In July, Kaspersky told Blipping Computer that it would begin closing its business and lay off the staff on July 20 because of the sales and distribution ban. In early September, Kaspersky also emailed customers assuring them that they would continue receiving reliable cybersecurity protection from Ultra AV, owned by Pango Group. After Kaspersky stopped selling softwares and updates for US customers, however, these emails failed to inform users that Kaspersky product would be abruptly deleted from their computers and replaced with Ultra AV without warning. What could go wrong? Ultra AV first installed on Kaspersky users' PCs. According to many online customer report, including Blipping Computer Forum, Ultra AV software was installed on their computers without any prior notification, with many concerned that their devices had been infected with malware. I woke up, and this is a a comment from one of the users of the application. Open quote. I woke up and saw this new antivirus system on my desktop and tried opening Kaspersky, but it was gone. So I had to look up what happened because I was literally having a mini heart attack. That my desktop somehow had a virus which uninstalled Kaspersky somehow. One user said, close quote. To many, to make things worse, why some users could uninstall Ultra AV using the software uninstaller, those who tried removing it using uninstalled apps say it reinstalled after a reboot. Talk about a rootkit, causing further
Yep,
concerns and about a
absolutely.
potential malware infection. Right. So again, without having to dig all the way, through this document, now it's time for everyone to chime in. Now, I know a few places where I've got opinions, but I'm gonna hold off on my opinions at this stage. So I want to see what people are thinking. So what are you guys saying? What are you guys thinking about this one?
If I saw some random AV just install itself on my PC, I try to uninstall it and it reinstalls itself. I would be trying to dig into the code and look at like the network connections. What exactly is it doing? Is it like is this a backdoor? Uh, it sounds very sus.
Yeah, shade at the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially because the name Ultra AV would look very, very suspicious because like it doesn't look very smart, and the naming is like okay, something Ultra something is like okay, well, it was the first name that comes up when you think about something like you want to make a good product, just name it Ultra and yeah, that was one of the first names.
Oh, jeez, that's a good one. That Alex. That's officially a dig on Ultra AV. Perfect, mate. Perfect.
I would like to add, I feel most IT, how would I put it, firm, they always have this agreement with the end user. Like, so I feel, my opinion, something like that shouldn't just, happen just like that because I feel the customer itself, they need to be notified about it.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, I won't say it's like what Paul said. He said something about conspiracy theory that also feel that in as much that as a country, you don't need to expose yourself to, some kind of threat like that. I feel it's the internet itself was not built to be secure. So it could be a way of, US trying to protect themselves from, vulnerability or stuff like that. That's my humble opinion.
That's a really good point. And Steven, thank you so much for raising that point because you raised a really good point, which is end user behavior, end user awareness, right, and agreement. So end user awareness and agreement, which is UELA. So a license agreement that you sign when you download Kaspersky probably say some things in there which I would argue if you went back and read it now, you'd be like, did I sign this? Well, apparently you did when you installed it. Um, but let's talk about that whole thing about the U.S. And U.S. deciding to can Kaspersky because according to
Um,
what sorry, go ahead. Who was that?
so Sammy, I just wanted to add to because what I heard about this story.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to make two short points. So first, I think the biggest issue here is not actually installing antivirus and stuff, which could be, you could see as a good thing because I'll go back to that later. But I think the biggest issue here is about transparency.
yeah,
So I don't think it would be as a big thing if there was like transparency, like it says here that it will say that there was no notification. So if there was like an email saying, hey, uh, because of this and this and this, you Kaspersky will be unavailable, but we are replacing it. So, but now going back to my point, because we don't want our dear customers to stay, you know. Exposed to threats and everything, we will offer this sort of alternative with of our like our partners or something like that, and then they'll be much better.
yeah,
So yeah, I think the biggest issue is transparency. So if that was done that in a way that with emails just giving clear information and updates, well, I think it would be less of a thing and less of an issue. But the other thing is what I heard is that the Ultra AV owned by Pango Group, which owns some other software, and I heard that that sort of software was very controversial, had very big controversy around it. I don't remember. When I saw that saying about controversy, there was no more information on what the controversy was, but still was controversial on, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, vulnerabilities or something. But
yeah. Let's
anyway,
quickly Google it.
uh, yeah.
So if you look up who owns like where Pango Group comes from, it'll tell you it's a US based company. However, when you go and look at the actual Ultra AV installer, it's digitally signed with a company called Max Secure, and they're located in India.
Okay.
That's
All right.
interesting.
Mm. And
Yeah, wow.
the web begins to unwind. But anyways, so like
That's what I told you. It's a big spiral, man. You won't
yeah.
know.
So this is the thing, right? The way I'm seeing it, first of all, Alex, you're right. So perhaps there could have been more communication, you know, but the deadline they had is less than 3 months. So you know what I mean? So the US told them to leave the state in September from the end of June this year.
Yeah,
And this is a multinational business, so it's not like you can just pack up shop and leave tomorrow. And another thing is
that's
they
what I
did,
thought as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
they did send that email. So again, what do I, I'm trying to be very, very selective in the way I say this. What do I really know about the U.S. national security play here? But the reality is, I can guarantee you that Kaspersky is probably not doing anything that should warrant being kicked out of the U.S.
I don't know whether you know the issue happened. Huawei, the network company,
Yeah,
Huawei,
yeah,
China's.
yeah.
Same thing happened, and there's another company from Chinese owned because they had a similar issue which U.S. National Security said they have a backdoor. They just put up, but there's nothing called a back. There's nothing
So
there.
it's
Was
it's
there?
it's basically a legal backdoor because they're basically saying that they could that Kaspersky could be subpoenaed by the Russian government to give them access to U.S. citizen data. Well, surprise, surprise, there's a lot of other applications that the US citizens use that potentially
Yeah,
any government from the world could subpoena to get that data.
yeah,
Anyways, let's not go into data, residency and and privacy policies. There's a lot to dig out there, but I think potentially there is some oopsie from a Kaspersky's point of view. Perhaps they could have given customers more time to decide if they want to actually buy this Ultra AV or not.
Yeah.
Um, so that's probably one thing that they should have done. But I'm guessing they're probably trying not to refund people money, right? Because if they uninstall Kaspersky literally from day dot and leave, any customer that had any pending subscription will still have to be refunded. So this is Kaspersky's way of going, hey, we can still hold on to your money as long as you have an antivirus software. So yeah, there was also one notification that users would have received on the computer here as well. Apparently, this was sent out to all the computers that had it, but obviously that's if your computer was online at the time of that push notification. But yeah, this is an interesting one. I think this is still developing. But look, does anyone have any other question or perhaps any other point before we go to the next one? Being mindful of time as well.
Yeah, just one small addition is that, like you said, Sammy,
I
that
think you should also check your message box as well. Not just everybody want to talk. Some people just want to drop some message there.
Oh, 100%. So Nathan, can you please keep an eye on that?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So
Yeah.
Alex, can you go, Alex, and when you finish, and then Nathan, you read out what is in the message as well.
yeah, just to just adding what you said, because if we all heard about the pages exploding in where was that country in
Is it Lebanon or
Yeah,
Lebanon?
it
Yeah,
was
Lebanon.
Lebanon.
Yes,
Yep.
Lebanon.
Lebanon?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is that where these pages were produced, and by the moment where they got to the users, well, the thing is that it looks like that somewhere in between the
So,
explosion sort of things got into
yep,
into the technology. So
yep.
there's no guarantee that for example, if something was done somewhere, for example, I don't know, Bitdefender, for example, like I think it's Romanian based, but where's the guarantee that there's nothing in between, like some man in the middle sort of
Yeah,
software or something that
supply chain
will,
compromise. That's what that is called.
yeah. So there's no way that, okay, if Kaspersky's banned, that we are all safe now, because there's a lot of other stuff comes from other different companies, like all those stories about routers being rooted with the Chinese spying sort of stuff and everything. So yeah, it's just, if you try to ban everything and everywhere, well, you need to give some alternatives. Otherwise, it's just going to be in a small like bubble.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We might as well all just go back to the dark ages. No computer. Turn it all down. Nah, just kidding. All right. Thanks so much for that, Alex. Nathan, do you want to read out what's in the comment?
Yep. So GP just asks, what if the agreement before now gives them the right to install the Ultra AV? Just what if?
And that's the point. That what if is what I'm thinking, right? I almost was tempted to pull out, Kaspersky and use the user agreement, right? The license agreement that you sign when you first download the application. I am pretty sure there is something in there that says they are allowed to uninstall and install the application. Actually, look, let's do it. Why not? Just for
I think another important thing is the end user agreement is always very long. So most people don't have time to look at it. They should make it a bit shorter at least.
Oh, jeez. Well, that's the
So I
point.
think a lot of a lot of companies don't want you to read the user agreement, so they deliberately make it long so then they can specify like shonky behavior and whatever at the bottom of the agreement because they know people aren't going to manually go through and actually read that themselves.
Oh my goodness, there's different versions. Wow.
Yeah, that's how you make it even worse. You
Yeah.
have different for different products for different version products on different devices and stuff.
So yeah, like I think they've tried. They really tried to to abide by the US requirements. But anyways, so I'm sure if we put out one of these ones, that's for Mac, that's for iOS. Is there anything for Windows, just for the sake of it? Yeah, that's for kids. That's Windows. That's GDPR enabled. So um, just for those who are probably coming in for the first time, just wondering what this is all about. If you've just jumped on, so we're looking at a Kaspersky, an antivirus software that has been kicked out of the US, and during that exit, there were some mistakes that were made, which led to obviously catastrophic consequences for that organization's image and reputation. But so we're basically looking at, potentially like GP raised that good point, which is perhaps users had already given this company the power to actually make this sort of changes. So let's take a look at this one. What could go wrong? It's text based. All right.
I think it's better to use like a find if
Yeah.
feature or something
So
because
let's say
I don't think
uninstall.
we're gonna sit there and reading it. Yeah.
Let's search for uninstall. Nothing about uninstall. Remove. Yeah. You agree not to modify or alter the software in any way you may not remove or alter copyright notice, blah 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 blah. Is there another remove? Uh, yeah, let's not dig through this. You know, there's too much to go through. But perhaps, yeah.
Can we get this chat GPT?
Live,
Just put it,
li-
get ChatGPT to read through the agreement,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
that's true. Yeah.
I'm gonna pass that temptation. I'm gonna say no to that temptation because there's something else that we're trying to deal with here. But
Yeah.
yeah. Look, that's a really good point as well. But yeah, I definitely do recommend that people actually go and read that information a bit more and learn a little bit more about it. Because we barely have any more time, I'll paste the links to the rest in here. The one that I think everyone should definitely look at is the hackers targeting industrial control systems. If we've got some time, we can obviously look through that as well. But I want us to give Karthik a new mentor some time to obviously show us some really cool things. But yeah, I'll paste all of the links as usual in the chat for people to take a look at. But Karthik, over to you, mate. Do you want to I guess maybe a quick intro on what you're going to be doing today, but Karthik is going to be
Yeah.
giving us a quick introduction into cloud security and what cloud security is, giving us some basic introduction into cloud security, and hopefully at the end of this, people can take away some really good, useful, bite-sized nuggets that can be used to build upon additional knowledge going forward. So, Karthik, over to you, mate. Thank you so much. Great mentor.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Sammy. Thanks for running that as well. That was interesting. I didn't know that Kaspersky did that. So yeah, interesting, suspicious activities. But yeah, so in terms of what I'm gonna be getting into today, guys.
You can share your
So
screen as
as
well if you want.
yeah, I'll share on the slides. Yeah, as Sammy said, it'll be cloud security. Let me get the slideshow up first, actually,
Yeah.
and then I will start talking. Oh, okay. Do you want to share? Is it
Uh,
better from
uh,
yours, or do you want me
yeah,
to
I,
share
I
it?
I can share it if you want.
Yeah, if that's okay. If
Yeah,
you're okay with that.
yeah.
Yeah, cool. All
All
right,
right.
that will be better. Yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
All right. It's all
Yeah,
now sharing.
easy. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, so as Sammy said, we're going to be talking about cloud security tonight, and I hope to give you guys a quick rundown of what is cloud security, how is it sort of usually done at companies, and at the end, hopefully give you some insight into what's coming up in cloud security, and if you're interested, how you can look to get into it and upskill yourselves there. I really think it's a growing area. Like within security, I think the whole cybersecurity industry is growing, right? I think everyone knows that, but I think within cybersecurity, it is one of the faster growing areas. Um, I think cloud security, AppSec, I think API security is an up and coming one as well. It's not hot now, but I think it will be. There was some statistic I saw like earlier this year. I think 80% of the world's global traffic is driven by APIs. So you can imagine like the attack surface on that is nuts, right? Like, and how many companies really look at API security? Not that many. So I think that's going to be a really juicy one to unpack sometime later as well. But yeah, tonight let's get back to cloud security, I guess. We'll jump into the next slide, and I'll start going through it. So what is the cloud? I think I've put in a funny little video, and if we can just uh, play it. It's I think a quick 30-second video. If anyone I don't know knows this scene from Creed, thought it'd be funny. Some people might relate to it.
Well, that's if the internet works.
Yeah.
I'm in a dodgy hotel somewhere in Canberra. What could go wrong from B-sides?
All right. Okay.
Oh, is it
Here you
able to
go.
share the audio or nah? Will it play audio from the slide?
Yeah, so yeah, you can share the audio, but I have to select it next time I need to share. Yep,
Ah,
yep. So I'll start that again.
yeah.
Can you guys hear it?
All right. Okay.
Yep.
Here you go. Good luck with that.
Hold that real quick.
All right, man. Wait, don't you want this?
I got it right here.
What if you lose that there? It breaks.
It's already up in the cloud.
What cloud? What cloud?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one. What
So
cloud? The facial
yeah, so a
expression
lot
was funny.
of yeah, so a lot of people obviously when they hear the cloud, including my parents, they're like, what does it actually mean? They look up in the sky and they're like, how is that possible? How is my data in the cloud? Like that's not physically possible. Um, yeah, so I mean essentially, right, the cloud is the best way. I mean, there's another meme around this. It's just someone else's computer. It's just someone else's computer that's sitting in a data center somewhere, whether it's with Amazon, whether it's with Microsoft, Google, or with some other, third party person. That's essentially the cloud, right? You're just accessing someone else's resources. And then we'll just jump into the next slide, please.
Yes, no worries.
right.
No, don't play it. Next slide. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so now for the actual explanation, what is the cloud? So we've got the three I've put on the left here, the top three public clouds. So, you guys, everyone here probably would have heard their names, right? So Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure Cloud, and Google Cloud Platform. And they commonly usually referred to when you talk to people in the industry and like at meetups and conferences, people usually refer to them as AWS, Azure, and GCP. So when a company says like, hey, we run 100% on AWS, they're referring to Amazon's cloud. And obviously some companies, for example, my first company I worked at, Novati, we were 100% on AWS. So we ran our, development environments, staging, production environments, all on AWS. But my current company I work at, we actually run a multi-cloud and hybrid cloud setup, which I'll get into later and explain what that actually means. So we use all three clouds, plus we have some on-prem resources. So it's a very interesting environment. But yeah, those are your three top public clouds. And obviously, so Amazon is the biggest one. They're the dominant player in this space, and you'll see a lot of people. Most people in the cloud space are familiar with AWS. Obviously, coming second is Azure, and then third is GCP. They're catching up though. GCP is gaining I'd say like market share. Same with Azure, to be honest, because I think AWS, they've been dominant for quite a while, but some people are moving off it just because of cost reasons, and there might be others, but from what I've heard, generally it's mainly because of AWS's cost. And like GCP, I've heard like the support's better and the cost is not as much. Um, and then on the right, we've got some other public clouds that you can sign up to and start using their resources, right? So Alibaba is a popular one in China specifically. Um, Oracle, that's another big brand, big name. DigitalOcean, they've got some I believe like developer focused sort of cloud resources. IBM, of course, another big name. Linode, which got acquired by Akamai, I think last year. So they're also a really good one. And I think one of the cool things about Linode is they've got some privacy focused sort of things with their cloud environment. But usually a lot of people use it for personal stuff rather than I haven't really seen any companies use Linode for company things. But yeah, those are sort of the different cloud providers. Yeah, can move on to the next one, please.
I approve of the mention of Linode. I use Linode personally myself for
Yeah.
things like malware analysis or
Yeah,
certain operations or whatever that I want, like investigations that I want to do in my workplace where I can't stick suspicious things on my laptop because CrowdStrike is going to pick it up.
yeah.
But yeah, Linode is awesome mainly
Yeah.
because like it is insanely cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's why I thought it'd be good to mention it. It's really good for personal projects, as I mentioned.
Yep,
Like if you just want to
absolutely.
run your own stuff and it's cheap, yeah, it's a really good cloud to look into. And actually, I forgot to mention at the start, guys. Like, yeah, if you have anything to add or any questions, just I want this to be as interactive as possible. So, just chuck your hand up on the Teams thing, and then I'll ask, and then yeah, let's make it as interactive as possible. Yeah, so moving on to this slide, the reason I've put it's a big slide around it. So this is my sort of underlying sort of philosophy with security, right? When we try to secure anything, we have to understand the underlying technology. I think there's a lot of people that they jump into security and then they start going like, okay, I don't know, they just start like they sort of jump the gun a bit, right? Without actually understanding the core technology or the core application. They start trying to put in all these security controls, and they might put in a few which might work, but then they might still miss some gaps. So I think that's why I just really want to make a big point here. Um, Around understanding the underlying technology, and what you're actually working with. Because once you understand that, then you can look at it from a hacker's perspective, and then look at, okay, where do I need to secure it? Where are the places I need to put controls? And every single sort of area of security works differently, right? So like cloud security is different. Then you've got network security, you've got application security, and obviously there's intersections between all of these, all of these topics as well, right? Because you've got applications running in the cloud, you've got networks in the cloud. But yeah, I think the core thing is just always understand the core technology that you're securing, and I think that will help you go a long way. You just sort of keep it simple, and yeah, just keep that in mind. So yeah, I'll sort of that's part of the way I wanted to structure these slides as well. I'm going to go through the clouds, and like what is cloud, and then get into the security part. Yeah, thanks, Sammy. All right, so the first thing I wanted to cover was what is public cloud versus private cloud. So there's a few sort of different flavors of cloud that companies often use. So public cloud, as I mentioned on that previous slide, is those big name brands like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, IBM. You can sign up for an account, go to the website, and start deploying resources on there. A private cloud, on the other hand, though, is usually there's a few different private clouds as well, which I'll get into in another slide. But a private cloud is usually something that is the company has got like a local data center that's running it for them, or they've got like on-prem sort of servers in their office physically running there. So it's like basically they're maintaining the hardware and the security of it. Whereas with public cloud, you don't have to do that. You just have to, I mean, you just go there and you can just a few clicks and under 15 seconds you can deploy a couple resources. So there's obviously pros and cons between the two, as you can see on the slide. So public cloud, publicly shared virtual resources. They're obviously supporting multiple customers because they're building one platform for every company around the world. Supports connectivity over the internet, and suited for less confidential information. Although for this, I would say though, public clouds are actually pretty good at, even if you've got like some sensitive information, they've got some pretty good solutions these days. Like for example, AWS has something called AWS Nitro. So if you're running like um, if you need to run secure workloads with a secure enclave, you can spin up one of their Nitro instances, and it will actually keep your data like secure in runtime. So while it's using the data, because that's usually like a big sort of a gap that a lot of sort of compute workloads in the cloud can't support. But there are some some options like that. For
Yeah.
example, from AWS, and yeah.
Yeah, I was going to also add that obviously there are, public cloud resources that are available for governments. An example
Yeah,
is that they have Cloud Gov. One of the example
yeah,
of that is AWS, where they create a specific availability zone and cluster for a government that's only used by government. So that way, so it's a truly public domain that caters for different scenarios and different circumstances, being the general public, and obviously more secure, or highly sensitive environments like the government sector.
yeah. And obviously, on the other hand, private cloud, privately shared. So, you're managing all of it in your own data center somewhere. Still, you're still running virtualized resources on those servers. You can be a cluster of just yourself, or maybe you share it with only one or two other companies. Connectivity over the internet, fiber, and private network. And it is, I guess, if you have very specific requirements, it is maybe better because you're managing the security and the sort of confidentiality of those systems. So yeah,
Yeah, I think
really
Steven, Steven,
helpful.
Steven is got a question. Steven, you go.
Oh,
Thank you. I would like to ask, like, due to the public cloud now, you said the resources are being shared publicly. Something like data and infrastructure, are you saying other organizations can also have access to your information as well? Or is there like a way of protecting it or something?
yeah,
Actually, a really good
yeah.
question.
Great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so they won't have access to your data, because it's in only sitting in your cloud accounts. So when you create an account, for example, with AWS, you log in and you put some data in there. It only sits in your account. Um, there's no one else that has access to it. And obviously they're managing that access part. Like it's on AWS's side to manage that and to secure it. But yeah, no one has access to your data. If you upload it, it's only in your account. Whoever has access to your account then has access to the data. But yeah, that part is split up. They can't access your data.
Yeah, that's a really good way to answer that. One thing I would add to that, because actually it doesn't need anything to be added to it, but one thing I would say is that in quite a lot of cases, when you hear that there is shared resources in the cloud, it's actually just referring to hardware.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
mostly hardware that's shared. So
yeah,
an example here for those who are probably not aware of what we're referring to, just so you're not too lost, is say you've bought your laptop, right, and you have 16 gig of RAM, and you have 500 gig of hard drive. Well, it's the same laptop. It might have different users concurrently using it. One user is watching
yeah,
TV, the other user is watching, maybe you're doing work. They're
yeah,
doing different things, and the account, all of that access is managed using the account. So that's exactly what Karthik was saying. But it's the
yeah,
same hardware that they've been shared, that they're both sharing. This process is actually called a hypervisor. So basically, the ability
yeah,
to share hardware across multiple resources. So Stephen, did that answer your question? Did what Karthik say answer your question, or had anything else to add?
Yes, it
So,
did.
sorry to jump in. You mentioned hypervisor semi, so it would be like similar. Those accounts would be like similar to not VMOS, but like virtual machines. So,
Yeah, so it's
for
basically
example, a
just
Yeah.
public account.
it's basically
Okay.
gigantic virtual machine that's actually running in the back end. And that's why when Catholic say that, what he said, which is it's basically someone else's computer.
Yeah.
It's basically someone else's computer
Yeah.
that's in their backyard. Well, maybe not quite backyard, but in a data center somewhere that you're using, you know, and that's really what it comes down to. Alex, you got it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. So, where my quick question comes from. So, what is the purpose of having, literally, so from my understanding, privately shared virtualized resources? So, literally, like, but according to what Sammy said, it's so literally different hardware. So, it's on the hardware side, it's completely separated from anyone else. So, no one else uses that hardware, right?
No. The
Not
Am I
hardware.
on the
exact.
right path?
Not
Catholic,
exactly.
I'll leave it to share to answer that.
Yeah, so I think so what Sammy was saying was the hardware is shared, but it's what's on top. So the OS level and above is virtualized, right? So
Yeah.
um that's what's like sort of split. That's where the segregation comes in. So as Sammy was saying, right, let's say you've got a 4 CPU, you've got a machine that's got 4 CPUs and 16 gigs of RAM. And you've
Yep.
got 4 different customers using this one machine. And each customer has access to 1 CPU and 4 gigs of RAM. So it's split into like 4 areas. But it's one server running it. It's one server with 4 CPUs and 16 gigs of RAM. I mean, this is like sort of pretty like simplified version, but that's essentially what's happening with these. That's essentially what the cloud is. Like it's obviously on a bigger scale, right? These data centers are probably running like 32 core CPUs or even 64 core CPUs. It can go up to an insane number. But it's the same hardware and it's just virtually split up. It's just the same thing as like on your local machine, you're running like 2 different VMs, and they're virtualized and you're doing 2 different things. Um, but they're separated, right? You log into them using different accounts. You have different things running on them. They can't talk
Yep.
to each other. So even the network
Unless there's a
side is
vulnerability or
all
unless you
brought
allow
down.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Unless you allow it, or unless you and look, that's another thing, right? So with cloud accounts, you can allow it. You can allow cross-account communication. So through some settings, you can, but you have to configure it specifically. So it doesn't come on by default. And obviously in companies like our company, I think we have like, geez, like in total, like 400 or 450 different cloud accounts, right? And that's
Oh.
split up over like a lot of different teams. So usually a lot of companies will have multiple cloud accounts. Yeah. Hopefully that does that answer the question, Alex?
Okay, so just trying to understand if I understand it correct, if I actually got it correctly. So, like you said, if we have like 4 gigs of RAM, CPU, and um 16, CPUs and 60. Sorry, I'll start again. So 4 gigs.
4 cores of
Okay, so
CPU.
4 CPUs.
Yep.
Four cores and 16 gigs of RAM. And so if we give each customer 1 CPU and 4 gigs of RAM, that's the share publicly. It's public cloud, right?
Yes.
Yep. But if we have all 4 cores and 16 gigs of RAM goes to one customer, that is private cloud, right?
Not exactly. So the
Yeah.
private cloud has more to do with the way the how do I say the
Segregated.
Yeah. It's very much
yeah.
very location. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's where it's set up.
Yeah.
So I'll be covering it, and actually, I think I'm not sure if it's the next slide. I'll
Yeah.
actually get into more detail on private cloud.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
here.
Yeah.
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, so I knew because I knew this would come up. So okay, so I'll explain this slide, and hopefully that will answer the question a bit better. So
Yeah.
with private cloud, right, you've got different types of private cloud as well. So you've got starting on the left side, you've got virtual private cloud, which is basically people usually refer to this as a VPC when they talk about what VPC are you running in? They're usually referring to that. And so that's virtual private cloud, and that's on basically it's like it's running in AWS or Azure or GCP, and you've segmented a part of the cloud just for you. So that is like a separate segregation. So it's like, as you can see in the image, it's a cloud within a cloud, right? But you're that white space, that cloud is like you controlling that VPC completely. So companies often do that. They create their own VPCs in these public cloud vendors with these vendors. And then obviously in the middle, you've got managed private cloud. So this is essentially when you go to a local third party, let's say, I think TPG Telecom, like they do managed private cloud.
Yeah,
There's
and,
quite a
and
few
interactive
people.
as well. Interactive.
Yeah, interactive. Yeah, there's quite a few, locally that do it. Essentially, what it means is they've got their data center and they'll set up the hardware, or they've already set it up and they're managing it, and they've got people to manage it. And they'll say like, hey, you just need to hook into this. They'll give you instructions on how you can connect to their data center, and then you can start using their resources, right? And that's the managed private cloud, because it's not like one of these big public clouds like from Amazon or Microsoft or Google. It's a local data center that it's a smaller company compared to Amazon managing it. And they're saying, hey, we will manage it for you, and you can use the resources from our data center. So if you want to run like virtual machines on there, you want to store some data there, right? You do the same thing. And then obviously right on the extreme right, we've got self-managed private cloud. So that's like the one with the most control, because that's all done in-house. So you would set up, if you're a company, you'd essentially you'd build a full team of people to set up and manage, these servers. So, the servers could either sit on in a data center somewhere, or they could even sit physically in your office. Um, and yeah, you'd have a team basically running, monitoring that 24/7. And then your application and platform teams would be using those servers to run their applications. Those are the three different types of private cloud. So obviously the two, like I'd say the middle and the right are what like people usually think of when they think of private cloud. The one on the left is obviously just a virtual private cloud, like that's still running in a public cloud, which I I, I know
Yeah.
it might sound a bit confusing, but I think the important takeaway is like when you think of private cloud, it's just think of it as like a on-prem. It's like in a data center somewhere, and it's usually run like locally or by a third party or in-house in the company. That's the main thing. It's not run in AWS or Azure or Google or any of these big companies. Yeah.
Before I go to the next page, does anyone have anything else to add or anything else to say? And
Yeah.
is everyone loving this? I'm enjoying this way too much, so just want to make sure it's reciprocated across the board as well.
Oh yeah, I'm enjoying it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
That's going
I'm
right.
just not being overly vocal
You
because
have you have to
I
show the
want to give
mentor
other
some
people a
love. Just speak up, people.
No, it's all good. I hope it's not too overwhelming. I'll try to simplify it as well, right? So I think um okay, you know what the best way, okay, actually I've got a perfect analogy for this, right? Okay, so the best way to describe public cloud, right, is if when you go to the gym, right? You go to a local gym like a Snap Fitness or Anytime Fitness, and you go and use their dumbbells. You're using their resources, okay? You use your dumbbells, you use the weights, use the squat machine. You go use it, and then you leave, and once you're done with the resources, you leave it and you come out, right? You pay a monthly fee for this using their resources, but you're just using it one at a time. When you have a private cloud, what you're saying is you're basically building your own gym, right? You're building it in your garage or in your you know, I don't know, maybe you're rich and you buy a whole factory and you build a huge gym. But it's your own gym, right? You've built it yourself from the ground up. All of the resources, you own it yourself, right? So that's the best way I would sort of describe it. Hopefully that analogy helps a bit more.
I mean, probably to add to that, I would also say that you own the contents of what's in that gym, but you actually don't own the space that it's stored in. That's owned by the company that you have the private cloud with, and that's the space that you're paying the subscription for.
Yeah. Although I would say that's also the managed private cloud, right? If you're in the self-managed, if you managed private cloud, you'd be paying rent for the space, but then you'd own all the equipment. But then if you're self-managed, you'd own all the equipment and you'd own the space that you have the gym in.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you were just defining private cloud in general rather than the actual, or like all the
different. Yeah.
The three different ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps a bit more. Alex, do you still have a question?
Yes. So just taking your analogy with the virtual private cloud, the VPC. So that's like, for example, like going to a gym and having my own sort of private room there with all like the dumbbells and everything there, right?
Yep. Perfect.
And then it's locked when you leave. Yep, and it's locked when you leave. Actually, I've got a question back at everyone. Can anyone actually think of the benefit of going to the gym as opposed to buying your one and managing it at home?
Well, there's a lot less upfront costs.
That's perfect. Ding, 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 ding.
Time.
Yep, that's good. Does anyone have any other reason?
Maintenance as well.
Space as well. You need to make space for that.
Oh, perfect. Right.
Motivation.
Wait, what was that?
He said motivation.
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 Yes.
Yeah, motivation. He said motivation. That's a really good one. Yes, that too. I don't know how that motivates you though, going to go build resources. But yes, that too. But you can see why businesses would have to, grapple with this decision making, right? This is why businesses have to deal with: do we do private or do we do cloud? And this is what we're describing here. What we're talking about here is quite nuanced, because this is where things like the type of data that the client is going to store, the budget that the client has, there are different things that the client has to consider before they decide whether they want to do private cloud or they want to do public cloud, or even within private cloud, or whether they want to do a network segmented private cloud, which is obviously what VPCs are. And by the way, for those who don't know, VPCs are technically just overglorified VLANs. And myself and I thought we're having a chat today, and I thought that they had created a VLAN. So I thought this would make sense to you. VPC are basically VLANs on the cloud.
Yeah.
Right, just to create segregation. And so I think Pedro, you still had your hands up. So you go.
Yeah, no, it's just more like a opinion question then. So Karthik, what's your opinion around medium to small cloud business? Because for example, in audits you have to require those SOC 2 type 2 reports. Big business like Azure, AWS, they provide straight away. There's no cost on that. But when you auditing firms that use, not our firm, but like company organizations that use small to medium, they are quite difficult to provide a SOC 2 type 2. So just to get your opinion on that, would you say it's better to use big ones, or is still reliable to go to small, medium?
Yeah, I mean, so you're saying small, medium, you're talking about like the managed private cloud, right? Like you're going to someone else instead of the big guys for your cloud. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess
specifically,
as Sammy said,
just to clarify, I think his question, and for anyone who doesn't know what SOC 2 refers to, so this is a compliance framework that organizations are required to meet. So for Africa, it's different. For the US, it's different. For the UK and Europe, they actually have their one that's called GDPR. So there are different types of so different compliance requirements. So what Pedro is asking is, obviously, if it's a smaller cloud provider, they don't have the resources to provide a quick turnaround request when you're auditing the cloud environment for a client. So what Pedro is then asking is, because of that, turnaround issue, do you think it makes sense to just go with the public cloud because it's a lot easier to get that document from them? Pedro, did that make sense? Did I paint a
Yeah,
picture
no,
of the question?
that's way clarify
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think to answer that, I think yeah, I guess the one-liner would be it depends. But I'll say why. Right? So like look, I would say so in my experience, right? Like so not with cloud, but I can apply kind of apply the same logic, right? So in terms of dealing with like I've dealt with different security vendors, right? So like your CrowdStrikes and that sort of stuff. And sometimes we have had to say no to vendors if they can't provide certain like they can't provide certain certifications or they can't get that. So I think it depends on the company, right? Like, what is your budget, first of all, because that's going to be a big decider. Number two is, yeah, how quick can they turn around and help you with getting the certification? Like you said, the big companies are super quick, and they actually have very good. So like AWS has something called AWS Artifact, right? So when you create an AWS account, AWS Artifact is free, and you can actually when you need their report, the latest one will just appear there automatically. And you can like get that sent to you automatically. So they've got like all that stuff set up, right? Because they know like the thousands of customers they have, everyone's going to need it. But if you're small to medium managed, private cloud company isn't going to cut it. Well, that's a sort of a decision that the business has to go and say like, hey, is it really worth the risk of not being compliant? Um, do we stick with them or do we just move everything to a public cloud? Yeah, it really comes down to a business decision and like how you weigh the risks, and the pros and cons up.
Or what
Um,
what the purchase
yeah,
driver is, right? Because if the purchase driver is based on, like, if you guys are saying we don't have money to go for AWS, well, there you go. Your decision has been made for you, right? Because you've the opportunity cost is you don't have money to go for AWS, so you're going to go for something cheaper. And the
yeah,
fallout of that is, you might have to wait a week to get an audit reply, as opposed to just
yeah,
clicking a button and then that getting
yeah,
downloaded. So,
yeah.
and yeah, so it's basically a trade-off. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think look, like even with that, right? If you have to wait longer, then what I would do if I was that company, then I would factor that into my third party risk management, right? Every time I need to ask them for something, I would make sure that I ask them a week before or a month before or however long that this company takes. Because if the business goes, hey, we can't afford going to public, we need to stick with these guys. All right, cool. Like we got to work around the solution, got to find a different solution. So now it's just you got to be a bit more proactive and ask them beforehand. And you also want to make sure those sort of things are in your services agreement, your master services agreement, right, with the company, because then it's sort of a bit more enforceable with your like small to medium managed private cloud people. You want to make sure things like like they're keeping up with SOC 2 compliance or ISO or whatever's important for your company. Um, yeah, you want to make sure that's in the agreement beforehand, so that you can enforce it later.
Cool.
Also, I agree with you on that. Like, I feel before any client is meant to make like an agreement, I think there's this service level agreement they come into. I think it could be enforced there that this is what at so time this is what we want, and this is when we would need the report or something like that. I
Yeah,
think it could be enforced in the SLA.
yeah,
Yep,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's perfect.
yes,
Cool. All right.
yeah.
Uh,
Cool. All right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, no worries. Yeah. Oh, I think we've got.
oh yeah, I'll get him in. I think he's having
Ah,
network problems.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, cool. So the next sort of topic. So we covered everything in private cloud, right? So obviously, so private cloud, there's a few different things happening there. Um, Now the next sort of term that I want to cover is hybrid cloud and what it means. Um, so in the image, there's obviously hybrid, but I've also shown this private, public, and multi-cloud, right? So hybrid is just essentially a mix of private and public, right? So my current company I work at, IAG, we are a hybrid cloud environment. So we have on-premise workloads running in a data center, And then we've also got workloads running in all the three big public cloud platforms. Although the workloads don't talk to each other, so we've got different workloads running in different areas for certain reasons. Either teams, like a certain one of the four options for some reason, or I don't know, they've sort of just started building there and just kept with it. But yeah, essentially hybrid just means a company is using both private and public, right? And a lot of companies, I think hybrid is probably starting to pick up a bit more. It's not super hot. Like not a lot of companies do it. I think a lot of bigger companies do it. Like obviously your NAB, Combank, that sort of thing. But one of the main benefits of hybrid is that you get a bit of, you get the benefits of both, right? So with the private cloud, often if you're running like a huge number of workloads, the cost actually works out better in a private cloud. If you're running in a local data center, usually the cost works out a lot better. Whereas public cloud is good for scaling things up quickly, right? You can't scale things up quickly in private. So what a company might do is they might run their like core workloads, like the most important stuff, in the private cloud, like the stuff that they know needs to be on 24/7, right? Let's say you're NAB, right? And you're running your sort of transaction services, maybe you want to run that because that has to be on 24/7. So you run that in a private cloud. But maybe then you'll want to sometimes scale up, for certain events. Let's say during the Christmas time, right? There'll be a lot of transactions, like huge number, more than usual. So you need extra compute, right? Extra workload. So what you can do is instead of, let's say you need like 100, I'm just going to put this arbitrary number out there, right? Let's say you need like 100 workloads to run normally, right? So that's running in your private cloud. But during Christmas time, the amount of compute you need, let's say 400 workloads, right? But you don't want to buy 400 workloads for an entire year just for that one time, right? That's a waste of money. So what a company might do is say, okay, cool, I'm going to run 100 workloads in a private cloud because it's cost efficient, and run that for the whole year. And then for that month of Christmas or 2 months, however long that high transaction period is running, I'm going to run 300 workloads in the public cloud, right? And so I have a combined sort of, horsepower, let's call it, of 400 workloads, right? So 100 coming out of private and 300 coming out of public. But the good thing is with the public cloud, right, you run it for the 1 or 2 months. Once you're done with all of that, you just spin it down and you just remove it, right? You don't need it anymore. So that's the benefit of public, right? You can just within a few seconds you can deploy, you can stop things, you can turn it off. It's very agile. You can change things super quick. Whereas private cloud, obviously, it's a lot more takes a lot more to set up. But if you're running like big workloads, it is cheaper. There's this guy from I think it was Norway or he's a big like entrepreneur. He founded like hey.com, which is like an email service, and then a few other startups. I forgot his name, but like if someone's interested, I can share it later. He wrote an article last year where he was talking about how he moved his whole public cloud um, environment into private cloud and is saving $7 million a year, right? So private cloud can be very cost efficient if you run it correctly. And it's also very cost efficient for big workloads, right? If you're running like small workloads, if you're a startup, most startups start off in the public cloud, right? It's usually when you get really, really big, then you might go back to private and you might, because the savings is worth it. Um,
Yeah, and
yeah,
now
so that,
you've actually got enough workload for an FTE for a full-time equivalent employee, right?
yeah,
It's basically simply this. It's like imagine having to go hire, you know, a team of people to wash your car when you can just take it to a car wash. So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
cheaper to go to the
yeah,
car wash. But guess what? When you have like 30 cars in the garage,
yeah,
then it might be cheaper to actually hire one person or two people to wash the
yeah,
car for you at home. So
yeah,
yeah, now that's a really good point.
exactly. Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. Yeah, thank you,
I don't know
Sammy.
why I
Yeah.
picked the car wash, but yeah.
No, it's good. No, it's perfect, right? Yeah, yeah. No, it's a really good analogy. And so that essentially that's hybrid cloud. And multi-cloud is just a combination of you might use different, like you might use AWS, you might use Azure and GCP and on-prem setup. So that you're basically using a lot of different options there. That's essentially what multi-cloud is. It's not really doesn't it's just a combination of all of them. So that's all it means. That one's not too complex. So like for example, like I said, my company IAG, we're a multi-cloud environment. So we actually have four, right? So we use AWS, which is Amazon's one. We use Azure, which is Microsoft, GCP, which is Google, and then our on-prem stuff is running in a data center. So we're multi-cloud. But yeah, hopefully that covers everything. Does anyone have any questions for this section? Oh yeah, Alex.
I also want to make
Yeah,
sure
just
that,
quick
sorry,
question.
Alex, quickly. I just want to make sure that the international audience is also participating. So Nathan, do we have any message in the chat?
Not that I can see.
Yep. GP and Precious, are you guys still there? I'm not sure. But if you are, feel free to obviously put your hand up or actually start speaking, just to help out with that, with clarifying some of this point. It's okay to ask questions as always. All right, Alex, you go.
Yeah, just a quick question about so why, without getting any like details, maybe just because of confidentiality and stuff. So why did AIG decide to go multi-cloud? So instead of using one, because or I think is the answer that because different teams, because I think you mentioned before, right? Just got to me now that different teams inside the company like different vendors just because of different like products they give, namings and pricing and everything like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So from my understanding, it was mainly because the teams got to choose what they wanted to run with. There was no company-wide like mandatory cloud. So if a team comes up and says, "Hey, I need to run this application and I really like Google Cloud because I'm familiar with it," the company was like, "All right, cool, run it on Google Cloud." And then another team comes and says, "Oh, I'm more familiar with Azure, so I want to run it on Azure." And then the company's like, "All right, cool." They really wanted to make an agnostic environment. They wanted to give the teams the power to choose what tech stack they want to run with. And that's another can of worms that has its pros and cons. Because from a security side, managing multiple tech stacks is a very it's
that should be
it's
a
not fun.
nightmare, to be honest.
It is a nightmare.
I mean,
in
look,
situations.
I see it at work. But look, they wanted to give, look, it's pros and cons, right? So they wanted to give power to the developers. That's the main thing. They wanted to give the app teams, the developers, the power to choose what they want and make them and like make sure they like what they're using. So exactly, sort of what you said. Yeah, it's the teams sort of liked a certain cloud and then they picked it and run with it. And I think all the data center stuff, so that was run from like way before. So that was like, I think even before like cloud and stuff came about. So I think that's why we still have things in the data center. And but I think also because every new application or new workload is now being put into the cloud.
Cool.
All right.
Does anyone else have any other question? I also recognize that we've gone over time, but that's fine. So hopefully you guys want to still hang around.
Yeah. I'll try to sort of.
No, that's fine. We're notorious for having way too much fun always. So.
Yeah.
The last session was like 3 hours, so we've got plenty of time.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, right. That's a tough record to beat. 3 hours, Jesus. Yeah, fair enough. All right. So this slide, I know there's quite a few images here. I mean, I picked images just because I feel like they're the best ways to describe things rather than just putting text. And hopefully, I mean, I think Sammy, they'll get to rewatch this recording, right? If they want to.
So this will be uploaded.
Is that right? Yeah,
awesome. This will be uploaded to CyberLynk's YouTube channel as usual, and you guys can just reference this as well.
Yeah. So, hopefully, I know there's quite a lot of information here today, but hopefully, if you're stuck on something, you can rewatch it. And look, you can always reach out to me. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. I think, I've met some of the people here before as well. So, yeah, reach out to me anytime. More than happy to help. But yeah, so this slide, I'm going to be talking about basically all the different asses, I guess.
I've never seen it described that way.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. That was just off the fly. I didn't even think about.
You're
Yeah.
creative, my friend. You're creative.
Thank you.
I think you're actually missing a few.
You reckon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, there's so we have software as a service, function as a service. Well, okay, so you're missing malware as a service. You're missing ransomware as a service.
On the other side. Oh, ransomware as a service. Yeah. That would actually be an interesting topic someday as well. That would be related to like threat intel and stuff. If you get someone on threat intel.
Yeah, Nathan is the person for that. He loves it. He licks it up. So obviously he's working on the Python content at the moment. So guys, put your hand up if you want mentor Karthik to build a course on cloud security on the CyberLynk Academy.
That's going to be actually a very good thing, because I don't think there's. I've actually I haven't seen any courses, to be honest, like specific courses for cloud security, at least like dedicated courses specifically. So just vendor sort of like the vendors, they do their own, like I don't know, Azure or AWS, but some more like maybe vendor agnostic sort of training. That'd be very good, in some way.
Cool. All right. Mentor Karthik, you can see that the people love you.
Yeah.
I
would do the cloud security course if there was one. So yeah.
Awesome. The people have requested. You give people what they want.
All right. No pressure.
Yeah, definitely not.
Another unmentioned service here is a small one, but it's technically a sandbox. It's called reverse engineering as a service.
All right, enough going around. Let's keep going.
All right. Let's get stuck into it. Okay, so yeah, there's I've highlighted the three usual ones that everyone knows of and has heard of. So infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service, right? So those are the main ones everyone's heard of. The main thing I wanted to demonstrate in this picture is, as you can see at the bottom right, the blue and the green. So this is a perfect representation of showing what you as a customer, when you're using the cloud infrastructure you manage, and then what the cloud provider manages, right? So if we start right on the left, right? So obviously traditional on-prem, right? So that's, as we talked about, private cloud in a data center. Obviously, as a company, you'd be managing A to Z, right? All the way down from the hardware level, all the way up to the top, right? You need to set up the hardware, install the OS, put the code on there to run. You need to do A to Z, right? Then we move to the right. We've got infrastructure as a service. So this is your now we're getting into the public cloud space, right? So this is AWS, Azure, and GCP. So they manage the hardware and virtualization part, right? So they have their data centers. They do all of that work for you. But where you as a customer still have to come in is you have to, if you spin up a virtual machine in their cloud, you still have to install the OS. You have to choose what OS you want to run. You still have to, put the code in, depending what application you're running, you have to put it there and, put data and configurations on top as well. And then later on the right, we've got container as a service. Just a quick show of hands. Are people here familiar with containers by any chance? I know containers is also still a bit of a new topic, even for me, to be honest. How many people here are familiar with containers?
Yep.
I think the most popular one would be Docker.
Yep. So
you
get
very shallow references, but I do.
Cool.
Yeah,
that's
good.
good.
A bit of an idea.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. So Yeah, as you can see, so containers as a service, I think this is more of a new term to be honest. I only really discovered it in the last few days. But yeah, as you can see, the cloud provider manages the OS. You're only managing the what's running on the OS basically and above. Um, and then if you go to the right again, you've got platform as a service. So these are also a lot of cloud providers have this. So going from IaaS to function as a service, so infrastructure. So those four in the middle, you'll find in AWS, Azure, and Google, right? So they have all of these different offerings, right? Um, so for example, containers as a service, just going back to that for a second. AWS has like three different offerings. I think Azure has two or three different offerings as well, and Google has two offerings as well for that. So um, they offer that in like when you sign up for an account, you can use that as well. And same with platform as a service. So platform as a service is something like, for example, if you want to use like an SQL database, right? So that is a platform that you can sort of just turn on in when you in your AWS account and just use it and put data in there and like reference it. But you don't have to worry about installing the OS, managing the runtime, that sort of stuff. You can just chuck in your data, get your application to talk to that database, and then use it. So that's like a pre-built platform, right? You can just spin up and then chuck in whatever you want to chuck in there. And then again on the right, function as a service. Again, this is like referring to serverless functions. Similar to containers, this is a bit more. This is sort of newer. Like serverless has sort of been picking up steam, in the last couple of years. What a serverless function is, it's basically um, how to describe it? It's basically like a virtual machine that runs the code that you need. It executes the code, um, you know, for however long it takes to execute the code, and then it shuts down. The way to think about it is like if you've got an application, right, that let's say it goes and fetches the weather data, right, every single morning at 8 a.m. So what a function would do, a serverless function at 8 a.m., it would just spin up. It would run for maybe 30 seconds, a minute. And then once it gets the data it wants, it would actually spin down. So the machine would just basically remove itself. So obviously the benefit of running serverless functions is instead of having a machine that's running 24/7 and doing that 8 a.m. call, right, to the weather application, you're actually only running for 30 seconds or a minute, which again comes back down to cost optimization. And also it's good for security, right? Because you're only running for 30 seconds or a minute. You're not leaving a workload running for 24 hours, 7 days a week. But yeah, so going back to this picture, as you can see, you only have to worry about the application code and the data and configurations. And then obviously on the extreme right, SaaS. This is probably super familiar and everyone knows it. SaaS is everywhere. Like Google Drive, OneDrive, right? You don't have to do anything. You sign up for an account, you just use it, and you don't have to think about anything at all. You just chuck in your data, configure it how you want, and you're good to go. Um, but yeah, hopefully this picture helps you understand and break down the different levels of management. As you move to the right, there's less to manage. And obviously on the left, you're managing everything. And I would say that I think the most important thing from a security perspective, um, is the more you manage, the more sort of data and logs you can get out of it as well, right? So as you move more to the right, there's less things you can get out of the application in terms of like security logs and security information, right? So if you're running, for example, if you're running like an SQL database on a virtual machine in Amazon, right? So that would be the infrastructure as a service column, right? Because you're using a virtual machine, but you've installed SQL, like you've put SQL database on there. But you're still managing the OS and the runtime, right? So you can actually get logs, you can configure logs out from there. But if you use Amazon's built-in platform as a service offering and you're running an SQL database on there, you only have visibility up for those three blue boxes, right? You don't actually have visibility into the runtime and the OS. So this is an important thing as well for security teams to understand. As the vendor or your third party manages more of it, often you will get less visibility. Not all the time. There are times that the vendor or third party, they will have ways to share logs with you. For example, for SaaS applications, right, like Google Drive, or like Microsoft, right, there are ways to get logs of what users are doing within OneDrive and those sort of things. So that there are ways to get the logs, but the chances are
They're
less,
usually based on
basically.
activity notifications.
Yeah, yeah. So that's also another important thing to manage. Obviously, the more control you have, the more you can do with it, and you can choose whatever you want to do with it, like get logs or anything. And the more the vendor manages it, the more, you have to sort of agree to what they want, and how they run it. But then again, you've got different vendors, right? So maybe one vendor might say, "Hey, we can do this for you," and the other vendor can't. So you'll choose option one. But yeah, that was just a little side note I wanted to add. That's important as well when choosing what is the right service to go with. Yeah.
Cool. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I think I went too fast.
Cool. Yeah, all good. And just a quick one, like it's just sort of similar topic to the previous slide. I've just picked this from AWS's website. The cloud security shared responsibility model. All clouds, like Google, Azure, run basically the same run with the same sort of idea. As you can see in the picture, they've divided the responsibility. So that's why it's called shared responsibility, right? Because it's both the customer and AWS. AWS's responsibility for making sure the sort of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of what you're running there is all good. So as you can see on the bottom, AWS, is responsible for the security of the cloud, right? So in terms of, you can see the regions, availability zones, edge locations. This is just basically just saying all the physical infrastructure, right? All of the physical infrastructure, it's responsible for it. So they've got to have cameras, they've got to have security guards, they've got to have locks on their doors, all that stuff. Obviously on a probably more like a Fort Knox type level. So it's not easy to break in. But that's what they're saying. They're saying AWS, we know we are responsible for the physical security of where your workloads are running, right? And as you can see, they also saying, yeah, compute, storage, database, networking. Again, that's all the physical things, making sure things are, connected to the right places in the data center. Yeah, and then obviously on the blue side of the top, customer. So, you can see that customer is obviously responsible for the data that they're putting in the environment. All the identity and access management, again, managed through the Cloud Console online. All the applications you're running, operating system, all the network and firewall configurations that you're making. That's all, your responsibility as a customer when you're using their services. And as you can see, customer has responsibility for security in the cloud, right? So so AWS is like, around like of the cloud, like the physical security and all the physical aspects of it, but customer is responsible for all the stuff that's actually inside those servers and running, like all the data and all that. Yeah. Hopefully that helps explain. And yeah. Any questions? Okay, I think all good.
So what about for example, so because so according to this model, it says that only the hardware side is only the hardware part is the responsibility of the vendor.
Yeah.
But if you remember the previous slide, we have different models.
Yeah.
And there we have for example, if I run, I don't know, platform as a service, so my responsibility is just scaling application code, data, and configuration. So, for example, what about if there's vulnerability on the OS level? That's software, not hardware,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
according to this model, according to this sort of, the OS is the responsibility of the vendor
Of the customer. Yeah. That's a very good
or the
pickup.
customer.
Yeah. That's a very good pickup. Yeah. So if we could go back to the previous slide, so yeah, that's a good point. So if you're using their platform as a service offerings, they will take care of the OS updates and upgrades. Um, I guess yeah. So that's actually a good point. In that other slide, I probably should have put that applies to the infrastructure as a service, not their other offerings. Obviously, all their other offerings, it's accurate to this image.
Yeah, I think
So AWS still manages all the green stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Also, just to add, obviously, this image is more telling you an average, right?
Yeah.
Typically, software and hardware of this sort of range will be managed by the cloud provider, and then typically these sort of things will be managed by the customer. Now, obviously, if you then start to look at the different types of cloud models there are, and the different cloud options that you have, those services that you buy, the cloud option that you buy, the cloud services that you buy, determine where that responsibility model sliding, whether it's sliding left or sliding right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
think
Yeah.
I
But
think the
that's
analogy you gave us well about the API just making a call 8 a.m. every day, because that
yeah.
and I think everyone would agree with you that if an API is making a call every single morning, why waste money and running that resource if and going to use traditional infrastructure as a service sort of offering to run something
Yeah.
that only runs once a day for a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
why this whole thing is actually really there to ensure that costs and resources are managed effectively, because the one
Yeah.
thing that is finite is resources, right? And it has to be managed
Yeah.
properly to get value.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just expanding on Sammy's point and on this page, right? The important thing here as well, it's like important to understand all these different versions of services, because I think it's important to understand like how to build applications as well, right? Because when if you're thinking about securing them, you also have to understand um, how to build them, right? When you understand how to build something, you know how to break it, and then you know how to secure it because you can see the gaps. Um, so usually when you're choosing, an app team might come to you and say, "Hey, we're not sure what is the most secure or the best thing to do when we need to build, let's say we need to build this thing that makes an API call at 8 a.m. every day, but we're not sure what is the best thing to do." And you as a security advisor, you could go like, "Hey, I would recommend function as a service. Just use a serverless function, and it's also the most secure because you're only letting the workload run for 30 seconds or a minute. You have to protect the workload for 30 seconds or a minute rather than 24/7, constantly." And I think actually a really key point, if there's one of the important key things you take away from tonight, it's this. It's as a security person, you really have to understand the other person's world, right? If you can give good advice on like their work and their environment, like you don't have to be an expert in their world, but like if a cloud person comes to you and talks to you about the cloud environment and you go like, "Oh, hey, why don't you try this?" Right? Instead of running infrastructure as a service for this one API call, just run it as a function and you'd save money. It's more secure, less to manage, right? You don't have to manage an OS. You don't have to manage upgrades, patching. And then the guy would go to you and be like, "Oh, wow, that's actually a really good point. Thank you for, suggesting that." That's how you stand out compared to everyone else. Because when you are thinking on a holistic level, and not only about security, like obviously security is your main focus, but if you can think about, okay, if they build their environment this way, or if they architect it in a certain way. I mean, this is maybe getting us a bit advanced, but like
It's good.
If you
It's
can
good.
look at
Keep going.
things from a holistic view, yeah. Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, if you can look at things from a holistic view, it really it helps you set yourself apart. Yeah. Sorry, Sammy.
Oh, I was like, yeah, that's good. It's good. Keep going. That was what I said. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I just wanted to make. I think that's really important. Whatever area of security you're in, you really gotta. That's why I said at the start, you really gotta understand the core technology. You really gotta get that right. If you don't have that right, it's gonna be very hard to communicate with these teams. It's gonna be harder to work with them and secure their applications or their workloads. Yeah. All right, cool. Let's. I think we're good. We can move to the next one. All right. So yeah, common risk and challenges in the cloud. So as we said, right, public clouds because it's so agile, so easy to deploy things. Things are always constantly changing. Takes less than 5 seconds to go and deploy something. Like I could log into my console now and go and deploy an EC2 that's open to the an EC2 is a virtual machine, so that's open to the world, right? So people can start trying to log into it via RDP. Um, right. So that's the risk with cloud environment. It's a good and a bad thing, right? It's a double-edged sword because you can scale and you can build things very quickly in the cloud, which is why a lot of startups, will go to the cloud because you can go nuts with the cloud, right? Like you can consume as much as you want. But obviously the risk with that is the more you build, it gets harder to manage, and if you're building too quick as well, you're not sure how secure everything is. Um, Second point, often managed by different teams. So again, it's sort of linked to the first point where different teams are managing it, different accounts, so they're all building their own things and building quickly as well sometimes. And the other challenge with having different teams is you're having to work with a lot of different people, right? Um, and having to talk to different stakeholders. And sometimes there'll be often different tech stacks running. And that itself is a challenge, right? Because it's not one sort of team and one tech stack. So you often have to change your way of thinking, when you're talking to one team versus another. The third point, shadow IT. This is a common, I mean, this is outside of cloud security as well, right? But it's sort of very prevalent in cloud security. It's just if someone, spins up 10 virtual machines, and if you can't see it, then you can't secure it, right? What you don't know, you can't secure. And so cloud security is obviously it's more of a risk because people can, if you don't have ways to sort of control your resources and have good visibility across your cloud, this sort of thing can get out of control, and it's hard to sort of um, you know fix it once it's already been out there. Last.
Put in the genie
Oh, yeah.
back in the bottle. It's hard.
Yeah, that's. Oh, I was thinking. What was the saying? Yeah. It's hard to put. Yeah, once a genie's out, it's hard to put it back in the
Yeah,
bottle. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to think of that, and then they didn't come to me.
that's all right.
Yeah. And then obviously last one. Misconfigured cloud resources. So again, like related to the rest. Teams are building, they're deploying resources, but if they're misconfigured, that just leaves them open to exploitation, right? So I think a big one that everyone saw, was it last year, the year before? I can't even remember that. Oh, it was the year before, right? It was 2022, right? The Optus breach, was it?
Yep, 2022. Yeah.
Yeah, 2022. Yeah. So that was a misconfigured API, right? It was unauthenticated, and it was open to the world, right? So that's two huge misconfigurations, right? And it just shows, right? Like hackers these days, sometimes they don't even have to find super complex things. Like they don't even have to be that technically savvy. Like they just have to find mistakes that someone's made and then exploit that. So that's a big issue as well, because often companies are deploying things and putting things in the cloud, and then they're misconfigured, and then it gets hacked, and then they're like, oh, how did this happen? And it was just like a simple button would have fixed it, right? Like flicking a switch on, right, would have fixed it, like closing access on RDP, or closing access on, or just limiting access to one IP rather than allowing like quad zero, inbound connections. Like, simple things like that, can save a lot of trouble. Yeah, Alex?
Yeah, just to add to what you said, because you just triggered my memory, because I remember, I think last year, there was a situation when at least once a month there was some news of some data leakage or data breach because of misconfigured AWS buckets.
Yeah.
But I think but it stopped, so I haven't heard anything recently. And I think because AWS put in some security measures by default, so so some security measures that previously you had to do it yourself, but now that you get it out of the box. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good
So
that they did
companies
that. Yeah.
change stuff like that. Yeah, especially when
Yeah.
it's happens too often. They're like, I understand. Okay, well, it's just a bad publicity. So they'll just take on some things themselves and put in some configurations. So yeah, just to make it better for themselves
Yeah.
and their market share.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, often, all these cloud companies will have default settings that are like to best practice. And if you want to open it up, you want to open access up to it, you have to specifically allow access. For example, on buckets, that's a really good point. Like when you go into AWS and you go and create a bucket, you actually have to tick a box that says allow public access, and then even within that box there's like sub boxes on the types of public access. If you don't tick that box, then by default it's just like private. So yeah, there are some good best practices that like a lot of these cloud providers obviously build in, and they make it harder to misconfigure it. But look, still misconfigurations happen a lot. I see it every day. And yeah, it's in every company. So, and the reason that the fact that this is a big issue is exactly why I think also cloud security is a growing sort of area
That's
as
why you have a
well.
job.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, absolutely.
exactly. Yeah.
And the more your environment scales, the
Yeah,
the more security misconfigurations you're going to make, especially
yeah,
if you're not trying to automate it.
exactly, exactly.
Which
Um,
goes back to your point before, API security.
Ding, ding,
yeah,
ding.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so obviously, to address those risks and challenges, I've just listed down a couple best practices and solutions, I've come up with the top from the top of my head. Make sure to include and create new policies or SOPs and so on around the cloud, right? For incident response, vulnerability management, and so on. Sometimes if a company is first, like they're new to the cloud and they're going into the cloud, they haven't really sort of done that deep dive and thought about, okay, if an incident happens in the cloud, how do I respond to it? Obviously, there's some overlap, but there are also some other things that are different, right? For example, in Amazon, if you have a server that's running there, you're going to have the what's it called, the operating system logs, and Windows Windows logs, the same thing as operating system, and all those things. I think it's getting late for me. That's why my
You've
brain's
been
like,
going for like
wow.
about an hour, so yeah, you've done a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nah, thank you. Yeah. But for example, in AWS, you can also get logs from CloudTrail, which is like a native AWS thing that collects logs about every user and what they do. So there are native things that you can turn on that sometimes people miss. And often when you get to incident response, and then even if you go to a third party and they're like, hey, do you have these logs? And then you're like, oh man, I didn't turn it on. And then, now you've just lost a lot of value, right? So I think when companies are going into the cloud, or even if they're already in the cloud, just make sure that they've got all these basic things turned on. Like I said, I think it's similar to misconfigurations. There's a lot of like easy wins, I think, that people can get. Just turning on native cloud sort of services. Like I said, like native cloud logging, like CloudTrail in Amazon. And AWS config is another really useful one for incident response in the cloud. Yeah. So the next point is yeah, choose a relevant cybersecurity framework or standard to adhere to. I think this is helpful, especially if you're getting started in the cloud, or if you're for the first time having to like really uplift your cloud security. And so IAG, from my experience, right, I can probably talk to this a little bit from what I'm doing at the moment. We are currently uplifting our cloud security, and we're choosing to align it to NIST and APRA CPS 234. So those are two standards. And we're doing it's NIST 800 revision 5, which is like the latest version
Yeah.
of NIST 800. And essentially those are just two cybersecurity standards that they basically have a list of things you need to do. Like it's just all check boxes that it says you need to have X, Y, Z things all set up in a certain way. And it's like a long list, right? Like a long laundry list of things you have to do. But it really helps companies because if you don't know where to start, it's usually helpful to just choose a framework or a standard and just start there. Just start somewhere, and then build up from that. Obviously, a lot of frameworks will overlap with one another. So if you're doing one framework, it might actually cover 80% of another framework, anyways. So I would say the important thing is choose a relevant one as well, right? So if you're in the financial services industry and you're processing credit cards, obviously PCI is a must. PCI DSS, that's a must. If you're I think in America, a lot of people care about SOC 2. Like I've also know some local startups that they tend to try to get their SOC 2 compliance first to try to sell to American customers because that's apparently a big thing there, and they really like their SOC 2 compliance. So according to the country you're in, the industry you're in, there's certain standards or frameworks you'll need to align to. So and that will help you create a plan, right? When you see the things you need to do, you'll go, okay, cool. How do I meet all of these criteria? So that's sort of the thinking there. The third one is implement preventative, detective, and responsive security controls for your cloud environment. So these are all sort of different types of security
Yep.
controls. So a preventative one, for example, would be in AWS. If I log in, I'm restricted to, like, I can create a virtual machine, but I can't, for example, make it open to the internet. Like, that is a rule you can put within AWS, right? That's a policy you can set within AWS. So that's a preventative control because it actually stops me from even doing the action, right? So it's preventative because I can't even misconfigure it, even if I want to. Even if I was a bad actor, like I wanted to do it on purpose, I literally could not. So that's preventative. Detective is obviously if it's already happened. So let's say the preventative check wasn't there, or somehow you got around the preventative check. Then your second layer of defense is having a detective control that says, hey, we are monitoring the cloud environment and we've noticed this one misconfiguration, right? Let's say an S3 bucket, it's changed from private to public 20 minutes ago, right? So that's a detective control. It will alert you on things that have changed and things that are obviously changed for the worse. And then obviously responsive are things like, you can, there's some good automation tools out there where, if I go in and make a private S3 bucket public, so then the data can be accessed by anyone, there might be an automated response to close it. So it will change the bucket from public to private again, right? So that obviously links in with the detective control because the detective control will send the alert, then the alert will go to your responsive control, and the responsive control will come back and shut it down. So that's sort of the gist of that. And obviously there are different ways to do this. There are different processes, different tools you can do for that. Yeah. And the fourth one, and I think one of the most important ones, make sure to upskill yourself. Make sure to be constantly learning. Things are always changing in the cloud with similar to any technology, right? Technology is always changing. You've always got to keep up with it. So make sure to upskill yourself, whether that's through, even YouTube or Google or more formal courses, whatever works for you. Just make sure you're keeping up to date with what's happening. Um, and your team as well, and understand the applications, services, and environments you're securing, as mentioned before. Yeah.
Cool. Does anyone have any question or point about this page? I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, awesome. And here I just wanted to mention a few cloud security tools and services that are common. So, I mean, these are all tools pretty much. So the tool market categories you can see at the start, like CSPM, CWWP. Oh, actually, sorry, that's a typo. It should be CWPP. So it should be Cloud Workload Protection Platform, but anyway, that's all right. So that is a market category. Like that's basically like Gartner has defined this market. So Gartner is if people are familiar with Gartner, they're a big security. How would I describe them? What's the best way to describe Gartner?
I know.
Not actually, they don't
They're
really
not
do
even
security
security.
as well. They
It's more a
do
business
that.
driver. So the
Yeah,
cybersecurity business driver firm. They are a research firm as well.
yeah. I think that's the best way to put it. So they're a research firm for a lot of different technologies, and often when they research, they'll group technologies into certain market categories. And so I've listed the four market categories. The four market categories there that are all related to cloud security, right? So the first one, CSPM, stands for Cloud Security Posture Management. So this CSPM just looks for misconfigurations in the cloud. For example, an open S3 bucket, like a public S3 bucket, if you've got a CSPM tool, it will scan your cloud environment and it will look at it and it will go, hey, you've got a bucket sitting in this account with this name and it's open to the internet. We advise you should close it. Right. So that's essentially what a CSPM tool does. CSPM is basically you can think of it like a vulnerability scanner, but instead of scanning vulnerabilities, it's scanning misconfigurations, right? Which is slightly different. It's along the same thing where it's along the same idea that it can be exploited, but it's still technically different to a vulnerability, right? Um, I've put an example there. Trend Micro, they've got something called Vision One Cloud Security. So that's a CSPM tool.
Oh gosh.
Yeah,
One.
yeah.
We've used it at work. It is a horrible piece of software. Never use it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is bad. I just put it there
No
because
vendor
it's hard to
bagging,
find. Like,
please.
I just put it there because it's hard to find CSPM only tools these days. Like most of them are now converted to like a full CNAP platform. So that's why I just put them there. They were the only ones I could think of that's only CSPM.
No, that's okay, mate.
Yeah, and then the next one we've got Cloud Workload Protection Platform. Essentially, what this is, it's just like if you guys are familiar with EDR and antivirus, like it's along that same sort of line, right? It's just an agent that you have running in your workload, whether that's in your container workloads, or virtual machine workloads. Right, that's what a CWPP platform does. It's like it's more of a it does a bit of everything, right? Like it does detective, it does preventive, detective, and oftentimes it does responsive actions as well. And then CSPM, going back to that, that's more of a detective control. It just detects when something goes wrong. Yeah, so CWP, it's just an example is CrowdStrike. They're obviously a big company. They do a lot of work with protecting workloads and protecting things that run, and they're really good at it. So yeah. The third one is Keem. So that it looks a bit weird and people will often think it's Seam, but the issue is I think people have gone with Keem because there's already a Seam, like SEIM, which I think Sammy has covered in another Nerd Night.
Yep.
But so people will call this Keem, even though it doesn't really make sense when you look at it. That's just how it's called. So there was a company, Medic, which was an Israeli company acquired by Tenable, I think earlier this year. They really focused on that Keem solution, but they also had some other parts of cloud security. Keem is essentially, it stands for Cloud Identity Entitlement Management. It's a very fancy way of just saying identity and access management in the cloud, right? That's all you need to think about. Like you just have to look at it as it's identity and access management, but for the cloud specifically. Because in the cloud, identity management can actually get pretty complex. you can assign identities to machines and resources. So it can get fairly complex. You're not only assigning identities to users, you're actually assigning identities to machines, to resources. Yeah, so it can
Basically
get complex,
any
which is why.
organizational asset, right? Which could be,
Yeah,
both inanimate and animate objects or whatnot. So it can be tied to just a it could be a YubiKey key. That's an identity, right? And then that identity of that YubiKey key, which is when it gets used, who used it, when it's stored, all of that basically are things that can be monitored as well and tracked as an identity. But yeah,
yeah. Yeah, so that's essentially what a Keen product does. It just has a look, right, at what people are doing, what users are doing, what machines are doing with their identity and their entitlements that they're assigned. And then if they're doing anything out of the ordinary, right? So that's essentially what it's doing. It's just monitoring and looking at any abnormal behavior. Uh, Um, and then last is CNAP. So this is the big name at this topic, right? About cloud security, everyone's talking about CNAP. Okay, so CNAP stands for Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. Okay, so CNAP is essentially a combination of all of the three things above, and sometimes might even have some additional things. Like there's a new term coming out called CDR, which is Cloud Detection and Response. There's a few companies in this space, and there's a few CNAP providers that I think try to offer this, like cloud detection response. As I said, like incident response in the cloud, like there are some things that are different.
quite a
So
lot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's another area as well. So CNAP is trying to be that like all-in-one solution for cloud security, right? So the three at the top, they've all got like they're all what you call, I guess, point solutions in a sense, because they solve like a specific thing in the cloud, like a specific issue in the cloud. But CNAP tries to address all of it because the CNAP platform, if you guys are familiar with Wiz or Orca, Aqua, even CrowdStrike now is, got a CNAP platform. Um, they have all of those three things at the top, and then they've got some extra things on top of that. So it's basically all the three combined plus some extra little features. But the nice thing about having it all in one is you get that holistic context, right? You get everything all in one dashboard, in one view. You really get a more accurate view of your cloud security because you can see everything together. And so that's what a lot of these platforms like Wiz, Orca, and Aqua, um, that's their main benefit because you can see everything in one single pane of glass. And they're very, very powerful tools. Like I've seen them all in action, and they're really cool. Yeah,
So is just a question, sorry.
yeah.
CNAP, is it so CDR you said was something detection
Cloud detection and
response.
response.
Cloud, yeah.
Cloud detection response. So would a virtualized SOC kind of where you know detect threats, you analyze them, and then you do your incident response and whatever all in one platform would kind of fall in that category, wouldn't it? Or not really?
So you're asking if like basically if CDR is part of CNAP or
No, I think it's basically Nathan to correct me if I get your question wrong. So it's more asking about basically specifically for CDR, right? Cloud detection and response.
yeah.
Is that potentially going to replace an actual normal SOC, or is that
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Um, yeah, so that's a good question. To be honest, CDR, I haven't looked into it as deeply, which is why I didn't include it in the slide because it's a bit of a newer sort of tool, a newer area. Um, I'll 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 probably actually have to like
yeah?
look into it and then yeah, it's probably something good. I'll put it on the Discord. I'll make a note to look into CDR and then yeah, because I'm not too sure because there's quite a few different companies and I think they do CDR differently as well. I'll
Well,
look into I'll
So
look into like what
let me
CDR
yeah
really means and
let me add
yeah.
to that. That name is quite deceptive. Nathan, it doesn't mean what you think it means. So
okay.
it's basically, think of an EDR but for the cloud. That's basically,
Oh,
that's what
okay.
basically CDR is. So it's not exactly a full answer. The perfect way to describe it would be, when Microsoft went down the pathway of calling everything, ATP, you know, like, they had Defender for ATP, so they got everything, Defender ATP, Defender for Cloud, Defender for Identity, Defender for this, and then eventually they actually started calling it now. I think the new name they've given it now is Exposure Management. So CDR was basically a convergence of, like AWS. Let's use AWS for example. AWS Guardity logs, AWS security, logs, CloudTrail, all of the different analytics that basically gets done on top of that is what CDR will basically be doing.
Okay, when you brought up CDR originally, I was thinking of so a company I used to work for was called SecureWorks, and they have like an all-in-one cloud-based platform where you have your SIEM platform, your log passes, your log collectors, and all of your detection, engineering, and whatever, and incident response all in one platform.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think CDR would be slightly different. So I just in that quick bit, I just quickly had a look at Wiz's CDR. And yeah, so essentially CDR is, I think, as Sammy said, it's EDR but for the cloud. So it's basically it's looking at what's happening in the cloud, and I think, as I mentioned, right, when you have, so once it detects, for example, an S3 bucket has been changed, the access level has changed from private to public. So the CSPM side of it will detect it, but the CDR part of the platform will go, okay, how can we remediate it? How can we resolve? So it's the action, the response part of the platform. And I think, to answer again, to go back to your question, I think SOC teams will have to use the CDR part of it because it is like a response action. I don't think it will replace teams. It might enhance them, and maybe you might not need as many people, because you've got the tool doing, like, creating all the actions for you. Someone just has to review it and click execute. But I don't think it will ever completely replace a SOC. Yeah. I think it will just enhance the team.
Augmentation.
That's how.
Yep. Okay, so what you're doing is you're automating mundane tasks
Yeah.
because the analysis still needs to happen by a real person.
Exactly. Yeah. It's sort of like a seam and a saw, right? Like, I mean, when you have a seam platform, it's a detective part, and then it alerts the saw and goes, hey, do you want to contain this machine, or do you want to? Obviously, in some cases, the automation will just straight away contain it if it's like extreme. But maybe if it's like a medium finding, then you might get your SOC analyst to go through it and say, hey, do you really want to network contain this machine? So similar to the seam and saw analogy, you have your CSPM and CDR sort of part of that CNAP platform that works together. So that's how I'll describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
And
fair, mate.
looking, yeah, and just looking at like Wiz's offerings as well. And again, this might differ between different vendors, but I just always go to Wiz just because they're usually the top in the space. They also say their CDR platform is used for attacker simulations as well. So they'll try to look at your environment, try to find out where is I think Wiz calls it toxic combinations, where if you have like linked misconfigurations, for example, you have a user with a weak password, and then that user has access to a bucket in S3 that has sensitive data. Like, that's a toxic combination, right? Because it's got two different misconfigurations linked to each other. So I think CDR also helps unearth those, and then helps you prioritize, okay, what should you fix according to these toxic combinations.
Cool stuff.
Yeah, hopefully that sort of helps explain that part. Yeah.
Absolutely, mate. I'm happy with that answer.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. I think that's the last page is it?
Yeah, second
yeah.
last. I think. Almost there, almost
Cool.
there. Yeah. Oh,
No, keep going.
sorry, Sammy. Hopefully, I didn't make it too
No,
long,
no,
or
no.
I hope people are getting value.
There's no such thing as too long.
Yeah, not in NerdKnight.
Yeah. Not in NerdKnight. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I think okay, move on to
Yeah.
the next one. Yeah. So I just wanted to cover some emerging trends. So some sort of just high level things. Hackers are targeting cloud environments more and more. I put at the bottom, there's a bonus if you want to check the CrowdStrike Cloud Threat Landscape report. The most recent one they did, it showed quite an increase in the last year in hackers targeting cloud environments. I think one of the biggest bad actors, CrowdStrike calls them, what is it, Wizard Spider, I think.
Yeah.
Yep, that sounds right.
Yeah, Wizard. Wait, let me just double
Yeah,
check
with the
that.
spider. Yep.
It should be Wizard
Yeah,
Spider.
Wizard Spider. Yeah, that's the one. So they're a cybercrime group based in Russia, and they specifically target cloud environments. They are known for hacking cloud environments in companies. So, and they're them with a few other threat actors, they've sort of found more and more that they're targeting more cloud environments. I guess probably because they've found that they're easier to target and hack into. So yeah, and because of that, the second point, companies are becoming more aware of cloud security as well. It's becoming more of a topic now. And like for me, for example, from in my current role, I was hired mainly just for cloud security. Like they had a project coming up, and they hired like basically myself and if quite a few other people. They hired a new domain architect. They hired two other contractors. So they companies are starting to take cloud security a lot more seriously. Yeah, because it's becoming more of a threat now. Um, and third point, security teams are moving from traditional, old CSPM tools to more modern CNAP security tools. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, right? So CNAP is that new all-in-one cloud security platform. When you think about CNAP, you don't have to remember what the acronym stands for. Just think of it as, okay, CNAP is like the all-in-one solution for cloud. It covers, cloud security from all aspects. So yeah, a lot of security teams and companies, they're moving from the old sort of stuff, CSPM to CNAP. Because CNAP, as I mentioned, it's all in one. It's more holistic, gives you helps you prioritize things better, and gives you more value. The fourth point, shifting left is more prevalent as a preventive cloud security control. So shifting left is a term that essentially means in your when you're deploying or when you're deploying an application, right? Where you start off with obviously the code and coding it, and then you have to put it into a source code management tool, and then that tool pushes it into a pipeline, and then that pipeline deploys it somewhere in the cloud. So that's the whole process. So shifting left is essentially meaning that you're putting security checks earlier rather than checking it just in the cloud. You're actually checking it in while the developer is coding it or while it's in the GitHub repository. Um, so that's essentially what shifting left means. Again, that's probably a bit more of an advanced topic, and there's a whole topic around that as well to unpack. But it just means it's shifting left. You can just think of it as it's preventive checks essentially. So before a resource is deployed in the cloud, often like if you're trying to shift left with your security checks, you might actually catch it before it's even deployed in the cloud. That's sort of the thinking there. The next point, cloud security is converging with DevOps and DevSecOps and AppSec. Those sort of teams are now starting to like come together, I feel. There's a lot of overlap in terms of topics and knowledge and skill set between those teams. You'll see with a lot of jobs, if you see online with DevOps and DevSecOps and AppSec, a lot of them will often mention like, it would be nice to have or must have AWS experience or Azure experience or Google experience, right? Some sort of cloud experience, because a lot of companies are running a lot of workloads and a lot of applications and developing a lot of them in the cloud. So it sort of, ties in with the application security and their DevOps and DevSecOps.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's good.
Yeah. And the next one, container security. That's another big piece of the puzzle as well. That's becoming more important. Yeah, and again, that's often covered in, so container security, that's usually covered as part of cloud workload protection, because that's like something that's running. And so obviously, so for example, a company like CrowdStrike, they have a product for container security, specifically for container security, which is different to the product they have for like servers and virtual machines, basically. But yeah, that's another up and coming thing as well. Okay. So, big question at the end. How do you get into cloud security if you're interested, right? If you've listened to this whole talk and like, all right, cool, there's some pretty interesting stuff here. Looks like a good field. I might be interested. How to get into it? Yeah, first point, as I mentioned, I think with any part of security, understand the underlying technology first. Look at the cloud, create a free account. You can go to any of these vendors. As I said in the second point, right, choose one cloud to start with. Don't try to learn all of them at the same time. Just choose one, and then you can usually translate the skills into the other clouds. That's what I did. So in Novarti, I learned everything on AWS and I became like really familiar and good with AWS. And then now in IAG, I'm working with AWS, Azure, and GCP. But all of my AWS knowledge, I can still use it for Azure and GCP. I just have to translate the terminology.
Names, yeah.
Right? Yeah. So there's a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of overlap. It won't be one to one, but you can if you know one, you can work out the other ones very easily, right? So just choose one cloud to start with. I guess, look, AWS is the big one, so most people would just go with that. Unless if your company you're working at already maybe use Azure, then go with that, right? Depending on your situation, choose what makes sense. Create a free account and use the free tier. The one thing I would say though with the free tier, make sure you sort of keep an eye on that because, for example, with AWS, the free tier, there's different limits of free tiers. So like for some services, they'll give you free tier for only the first 12 months. For some other services, they'll give you free tier for like up to a certain limit. There's like different ways they categorize free tier. So just make sure you like sort of know that, and make sure you don't charge yourself like a huge bill, because that's one of the biggest things, I think biggest shocks that people get is like a bill shock. Like you go and create your own AWS account and then you spin up some resources
let it run over the
and then you're
weekend.
like, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, let it run on the weekend, and then you wake up Monday morning and then you got a bill and you're like, what, a couple $100? Like what's like, how did this come?
It's happened to everyone.
That's happened. Yeah, that's happened to me. When I was first doing it, I think I spun up a server and then I forgot to shut it down. And then, I mean, it wasn't too bad. I think I ended up, it was like $100, right? Which is not, but still, like it's something. I mean,
could
I
have
didn't.
spent doing something else with, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's money's still money. So like, but yeah, look, like yeah, but there's tools again. There's tools, native tools like AWS has something called AWS Budget. Like it's a service within AWS that you can actually per account you can say if the account is like costing over $2, send an alert to my email, or even you can do some pretty cool stuff with that. So again, just be wary of the free tier, right? Just read into what you're using and then what is the actual free tier limit. But they're pretty good. Usually they're pretty good. So like you want to play around with some
stuff. You
stuff.
can spun off T2 micros and the problem, the only annoying thing is it's 1 gig RAM. Like, what can you do with 1 gig of RAM?
Yeah,
like,
that's the thing. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is pretty small.
But at least you can get the certification of spinning something up, even if you can't use it.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, at least you get the experience.
Nathan,
yeah.
sorry, you got.
Yeah,
I mean, I was just gonna say you're gonna struggle running Windows 10 on 1 gig of RAM.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I've tried it. with
Yeah.
with all the optimizations I can get, and it's still like 5 frames a second.
Yeah, nah, yeah. Not worth it. Yeah. Then the third point, yeah, I mean, again, just mentioning the same thing, build something in the cloud, start simple. There's heaps of good stuff on YouTube, Google, I don't need to go on
And
too much. I
the
think, you can just search up cloud
and then
projects.
the CyberLynk, practical cloud security, you know, training that Karthik
Yeah.
is going to start next week. So guys,
Yeah.
Excellent.
yeah.
Looking forward to
Oh
it.
yeah, like I think it's
Yeah.
gonna sell like
Yeah.
super well. So yeah, let's get it going.
Yeah. There's that as well, yeah. And then number 4, I mean, this, pretty standard, network with people through events, meetups, conferences, LinkedIn. If there's people you see in the space that are talking about cloud security, posting about it, doing presentations on it, network with them, get to know them. Especially if they're talking about, I think within cloud as well, there's so many different areas, even within cloud, right? So, if there's certain topics in cloud that you like maybe it's like containers in the cloud, right? Like you want to learn how to secure containers specifically on the cloud. So there's people that will talk about that online, right? Try to meet with them, connect with them. Or there's people that will talk about securing data in the cloud, right? So again, different set of people. Last one, bonus if you're trying to get into it, blog and post about your projects or whatever you're doing and whatever you're learning. That just shows your active interest and passion. And when people see that on your LinkedIn page, or if you've got a Medium account, right, which is a good blogging sort of platform, or even if you have your own website, it just shows like, oh, this guy's really into this topic. And this doesn't apply to just cloud security. This applies to like anything
Yep.
you're interested in, any area of security. So, yeah,
Cool.
I think that's it. And then I think that's
Nice.
that's it. Thank you for listening to my TED talk. Nah. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank
Better
you
than
for
a
listening,
TED talk, I
guys. I
can tell
really
you that.
appreciate it.
Nah,
Yeah.
everyone, please unmute and share. Extend your gratitude to the mentor. Thank you so much. I think that was really nice. Really appreciate you coming on board. I did not think I was going to learn something new. I definitely learned something new. So, so that's
Awesome.
to obviously highlight that you've done a pretty good job here. And yeah, thank you very much. So guys, feel free to unmute and send your accolades and thank yous if you're still awake, people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
No, Alex, you
just
go.
wanted to say thanks to Karthik because he did a good job. Just wanted to say man, he did a very good job on like presenting, interacting and stuff. So yeah, to be honest, I never felt myself, bored or anything. It was you made it in short, understandable, and just good, making up good examples. So yeah, thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. No worries. Thank you. Thanks, Alex. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Karthik.
Thank you.
Everyone was
appreciate that,
writing
guys.
1,000,001 notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nah, that was good.
Yeah.
All right.
Any last
Thank you.
comment?
That was
Right.
good. Honestly, I enjoyed the lecture. At least I have little or no understanding about cloud, but at least with this, I was able to get something from out of it. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Yeah, no worries.
It's good. All right. I'm going to.
I think it's going to be fun working together, mate.
Yeah.
We need to do a talk about potentially maybe automating cloud services with Python or something.
Well.
Yeah. I mean, that's
We're
a
talking about
whole
Pulumi there.
yeah. That's a whole can of
Yeah.
worms. Yeah, well, yeah, you can use it depends, right? Python for infrastructure as
Yeah.
code, of using Python for like Lambda
Yeah.
functions. There's a lot of Python you can put in places. So in the cloud, yeah.
All right. Awesome. I'm going to stop recording and then we can continue
That's actually what I wanted to
conversation.
say because I think Karthik would